So now I'm going to go over the calendar list API group. And this one is, if you can see here, it is the calendar list. So it doesn't actually make changes to the calendar, it just adds entries to your user's calendar list. So let's look at the API calls and what you can actually change there. So over here, this is a lot used for like public calendars, like if you want to add holiday calendars. And let's go into like how to look at this. So first of all, let's look at the overview. So the overview is essentially all the parameters we can change in the calendar. So what we do with calendar list is we can add things to the calendar list and then change a certain amount of parameters there. You can see here, access role, background color, color ID, properties, solution types, conference properties. So what's like allowed or supported for this calendar, default reminders minutes, etc. There's a lot of parameters here, and I'll go into them in kind of detail, going API by API. So let's start by insert. That means adding a calendar to your calendar list. So you're a user, you have a list of calendars that are displayed here, and we want to add a calendar to that list. We're not actually creating a calendar, we're just inserting a calendar in this list, and then we can customize how it is in this list in certain ways. So let's see what that looks like. So let's look at insert. Insert is a post request. So what you can do is over here we have the HTTP request, the parameters, and then authorization, not important, request body. Okay, so parameters are just things that go in the URL, and if you don't know how URL parameters and paths and parameters work, I created a video about it. You can check it out. It should be a short. And then there's a request body. Those are things that don't go in the URL. So parameters that don't go in the URL. So let's get started. So let's look in Bubble, and we can see I have calendar list. Let's go to the insert new public calendar. So over here, just looking at this call, we can copy this URL, and that's what I did here. I literally just copied the URL, and I changed it to post, and I would put this as an action. Post, action. And then over here, there's an ID. So the most important parameter here is the required parameter, and that is the ID, and that is the identifier of the calendar. So in this case, what I did was I decided to add a public calendar to my list of calendars, because all the calendars I already own, I already know I'm using this as a test account. I have in my calendar list, right? I don't have any calendars that are not in my list. So you can add a public calendar, which would be like over here, I have a holidays in the United States. So in this case, I wanted to add Jewish holidays. And so I can get this ID. You can Google it and get the calendar ID for Jewish holidays. And you can type it in here. And I just typed in ID. I said private, not a big deal. And when I click post, ta-da, it worked. It gave back, all the information about it. Click save, and when I go to my calendar and refresh, I can see Jewish holidays is now added in here. Perfect. All right. So in the next API calls, I'll go into kind of all these other parameters, because those are also, you can, when you update and when you edit calendar entries in the calendar list, you can also edit all these parameters. So let's go one by one. All right, let's start with get. So get is you can get a calendar. Yeah, let's go with delete first. Okay, delete. So deleting a calendar is very simple. You copy the URL and you make a delete call. So let's go to our delete call. So delete calendar. Perfect. And we're in calendar list. So I expand this here, I can see I changed this to delete. I copy and pasted the URL I had, and the only thing I changed here is at the end, calendar ID, and I put square brackets around it. And what that does, it just adds a convenient place to put the value here. So instead of putting the calendar ID, I could just like copy and paste a calendar ID directly into here. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. Oops. Where is that from? Oh, whatever. Let's recopy this here. ID. And then I can add the calendar ID here. This is just a placeholder, obviously saying you should put the calendar ID here. Or I can just add square brackets to this. And then I can add the calendar ID over here. How do you get a calendar ID? Great question. So we'll go over multiple ways. The manual way would just be to go to a calendar, click on the cheap list, go to settings, scroll all the way to the bottom, and you have the calendar ID over here. You can copy, paste that. Obviously, we won't be doing that in our app, but just to show you. And it won't give you any response. And the last thing you should know is that you need to put this as text. So there will be no response. And this calendar FSGFS should be deleted. FSGFS is here, and then if we refresh, it's gone. So we deleted that calendar. Great. All right, so let's go to the next call. So the next call is get, very similar. It's actually the same URL, so we don't even have to, there's no difference in the URL. The only difference is the method. So if we go to get calendar, same exact thing, it's just get over here, and we want this type to be JSON. And getting the calendar should be data. We're not using it in a workflow. And okay, over here, so calendar ID, let's get a calendar ID. Let's say we want test calendar. So let's go here. Let's get this ID, paste it in here, and initialize. Ta-da, it gave us all the information of the calendar. Perfect. All right, that is how to get information from a calendar. All right, so we went through insert, get, delete, and let's go to the next one. Insert, get, delete, let's go to list. All right, same URL in here, except there's no calendar ID appended. So it's literally the same URL, except you don't have calendar ID appended, and you can add some other parameters to it. So we're current calendar list. Did I add any parameters? All right, I have the authorization in a shared header, so I don't need to add individual headers, but we can add some parameters here, like max results. So the way you would add this is you would just go, is that a path? No, it's query parameter. So we would go here, and we would put a question mark, and this is how you add parameters in any URL, any API call. This is how you add query parameters. So paste that there, max results, and then I can put in, just so I have it more comfortable, I can put in here 5 if I wanted, and that will work. Or another way to do it is I can put in here, just to make it more comfortable and dynamic within Bubble. When you're actually working within Bubble, you put 2 square brackets, and then you put in whatever you want to call it, max results. And this is just a way to keep track for you, kind of the key to keep track for you. You can see max results equals max results, but this is just a key for this value, the actual value that will be inserted there by Bubble automatically. We want it to be 5, let's say. And then if we wanted another parameter, minimum access role. Okay, let's do minimum access role, should be owner, for example. So we only want calendars entries where the access role, my access role in this calendar list, as you can see, right, we have a calendar list in this calendar list. My access role to this calendar should be owner. So let's say I only want ones where I'm the owner, so I will do and. I will paste minimum access role, and then I will put in 2 brackets, access role, and over here I will put owner. All right, let's see how this works. Ta-da, okay, we got a response here, and we got all the information, like a list. And if we look at the raw data, notifications, list, default reminders, cool. So the items are a list, and each item in this list will have a kind, ID, summary, test, insert, calendar, description, time zone, etc., all the information. So we have a list of all the calendars and the IDs of all the calendars. Cool. All right, so now we got the calendar list API call. Pretty simple, as you can see, it's pretty repetitive. Let's look at patch and update. So the difference between patch and update is patch will change essentially only what you send. So for example, if I send, let's look at our parameters over here when we're returning a calendar list or when we're inserting a new, essentially what patch does is it will only update the parameters you send and leave everything else alone. So it's really just changing an item or like a parameter in the calendar list entry, okay? In this case, we're working with the calendar list. It'll only change a parameter in there, and some of the parameters we have here are like the default reminders, etc. We'll go over those in a sec. So it'll just change that, but it won't affect the rest of the calendar parameters, right? So if you have 2 reminders, you can change one of them and the other one will be left alone. Or if you have, I don't know, let's look at patch update. If you change like the settings and you don't send anything else with the call, it won't change the reminders if you're using the patch method because it's just updating what you send. If you use the update method, it will changes like an entry in the database. So it's actually like deleting it and adding in a new one. So if you don't send certain parameters, those won't be there. It's like resetting the whole thing with what you sent. It's like replacing it with the call you sent. It's a different thing. Patch and update. I'm going to leave in the description a article on the difference between patch and update so you can see for yourself. So over here, let's look at patch. Very similar, same exact call, except the method is get, and we're adding again the calendar ID. So let's look at that. Update calendar patch method. Okay, over here, I get authorization we have in the header. And over here, I'm actually going to change this up a bit so it's dynamic within Bubble. So we have the calendar ID. This is the exact same. We probably put this as an action. This is the exact same as we had in all the other calls. The only difference here is the method is patch, and we probably want to keep this JSON and this as an action because we want to update something in a workflow. Now, the calendar ID over here, again, we can add whatever calendar ID. So let's add this calendar ID. Cool. Okay, cool. And now let's look at this JSON and let's go back here, calendar ID, okay, that we have. QB color format, we're not going to do that right now. It's not important for right now. So for patch, it says request body, the request body is a version of calendar list resource according to the rules of patch semantics. Okay, whatever. Basically what it means is you can use all the parameters in update. And if you remember, we went to the overview, we can see all the parameters that we can update. And so with patch and update, you can change the same parameters. Again, just difference in the method. So we're going to look at the update method because it applies to the patch. Literally the exact same call. The only thing that's different is the method and how it actually works. So let's go back here and look at the different items. So let's start with summary override. So this is like you can change the name of a calendar to this name, this summary. So remember, we're working with calendar entries. We're not actually changing the calendar itself. We're just changing our calendar list entry. So remember, we can have a Jewish holidays and change the name in our calendar list entry to, my holidays that I enjoy. And that will just change our name in our entry, but won't change the calendar itself. So that's what summary override is. And then we have color RGB format. Okay, true. So this basically says whether we want, this should actually be, that should be a query parameter. Oops. That is not a, let's change that. All right, so I added that here as a URL parameter instead of over here. And we don't need the color ID if we're providing the background and foreground. So if we go over here, see background color, you need to specify in the parameters for this to work. Probably subsedes the index-based color ID property. So essentially, if I have the color ID property, And just for background, the color ID property essentially is IDs. So these are like standard colors that Google Calendar has. Obviously you've probably used Google Calendar. They have a bunch of standard, event colors. And there's an API call I will go over later to actually get all those colors, and they work in numbers. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. And it will apply it to them. So if you're using the color ID, you do not need a background color or foreground color. Those are actually, like, if you want to define the color yourself. And if you want to define them yourself, you should put our color RGB format equals true, because that's RGB is like a number, formatted. Yeah, essentially. Yeah. So anyways, if you want to mess around with colors, you can either add a color ID or add a color ID and a background foreground, and it will apply those to your event, to your calendar entry. And so now let's look at hidden. Do we want it to be hidden from the list? Yeah, if you want it to be hidden. Selected. So selected means, like, do we want to act like now this reminders calendar is selected. Now it's not selected. Okay, so if you want to change that, defaults are true. Default reminders. Okay, so this is pretty important. This essentially, you can see here, default reminders. So it's kind of weird documentation, but essentially this means you're going to have a list of default reminders. Each list is going to have an object with method and minutes. And then the option for the method is email or pop-up. I just use email. I'm not sure what pop-up exactly is. Oh, maybe it's for like mobile or something. But email and the minutes before the start of the event that you want this reminder to happen. And you can send a list of them. So you can say 15 minutes and 30 minutes before an event. And so let's look how that looks in JSON. So the way that looks in JSON would be default reminders, open up a list, add an object with a method and minutes, and then you can add another object with a method email and minutes 30. Again, do that right now. You can just put a comma here and add that in and change this to 30. I believe this should not be in. Yeah, it should be like this. Okay, cool. And then let's go to notification settings. So notification settings, this is the exact same. It's just saying notification settings has notifications. Okay, so this is like a little bit more nested. You can see notification settings has nested in it notifications. Okay, and then notifications is a list, and in that you have to specify the method and the type. Okay, so essentially notification settings is saying, okay, email is the only option. So you want to get an email every time there's an event creation, event change, event cancellation. So you can define when you want people to get the emails. So if you add in just event creation and event change, they'll only get emails then, but they won't get an email when there's event cancellation. So let's look how that looks. Notifications, and then we have the notifications child. So notification setting, notifications child, a list opening up. And then we have objects, 2 objects, each with a type, method, and then over here, a type and a method. Sorry for the noise. And there you go. We see we only put event creation and event change. So when event deleted, we won't get a notification. And then lastly here, what did I get here? Conference details. Not sure why I added that. Doesn't seem to be important, but I will. Allowed conference solution types. It anyways only allows you to add Google related types. So it's not like so different if you want event hangout or hangouts meet. Not sure what the difference is there. So I would just ignore that. And so that applies to the patch method. Now, if you want to do the update method over here, it's the exact same thing. the only change here, that's why I put update calendar, patch method, and put method. The only difference is instead of patch here, you just put, and this will replace an entry. So the difference is like any parameter that I don't, put in here won't be updated. It will just delete anything that was there, previous data that was on this calendar entry. Just run this to make sure it works. Oh yeah, there you go. That works. Let's see, we have a list of default reminders, notification settings, etc. So as the calendar list, so hopefully that's clear. We have the calendar list entry, and then the calendar itself, which I will go over in another video. Thanks for watching.